I wanted to make one last point as far as the jingoism against Iran. This move with this aircraft carrier crap that John Bolton does. Of course, John Bolton comes out and he makes his announcement, and some general counter signal him. He's like, "Why would you ever do that? Like this is a very unusual maneuver, and it's because it was some attempted." Some kind of flex, because there's this desire of the neocons to do these flexes, but we're really actually unprepared for engagement there. We're actually losing. The U.S.-Israel strategic goals over there are not being met. So Syria, just yesterday, launched their final attack on Idlib, which is the final place where ISIS holdouts, the U.S. and Israel and Saudi Arabia sponsored ISIS rebels against the Assad regime. The final holdout was in this northwestern province of Idlib up near Turkey. They had organized this sort of this truce there where Turkish troops were keeping the peace along with Syrians on the outskirts or whatever. That's over with. Turks have pulled out, and the Syrians are going in, and they're mowing them down. So then you start seeing this. So that's why there's this happens at the same time as this escalation in Gaza, at the same time as Bolton makes this threat against Iran, at the same time that Iran starts talking about they're going to pull out of the nuclear deal. Which I love that the U.S. thinks that they have some sort of right now, that we have some sort of right to enforce this deal that we unilaterally pulled out of because of a big ball maneuver by Trump. So it's all kind of lighting up over there. But let me just tell you something. So in 2002, the U.S. did war games about a possible war against Iran. It was called Millennium Challenge 2002, and it was a total disaster. So just from reading from the Wikipedia, I'll close out with this just to show you how totally unprepared. And imagine the U.S. military in 2002 versus the U.S. military today. Think about the difference in the kind of personnel. The equipment, sure, but the personnel. So they did a war game which was red versus blue, where red was Iran and blue was the U.S. So red, commanded by retired Marine Corps General Paul K. Van Ripper, adopted an asymmetric strategy, in particular using old methods to evade blue's sophisticated electronic surveillance network. Van Ripper used motorcycle messengers to transmit orders to frontline troops and World War II-style light signals to launch airplanes without radio communications. Red received an ultimatum from Blue, essentially a surrender document demanding a response within 24 hours. Thus, warned of Blue's approach, Red used a fleet of small boats to determine the position of Blue's fleet. By the second day of the exercise in a preemptive strategy, Red launched a massive salvo of cruise missiles that overwhelmed Blue's forces' electronic sensors, destroyed 16 warships. This included 1 aircraft carrier, 10 cruisers, 5 of 6 amphibious ships. An equivalent success in a real conflict would have resulted in the deaths of over 20,000 service personnel. Soon after the cruise missile offensive, another significant portion of Blue's navy was sunk by an armada of small red boats, which carried out both conventional and suicide attacks to capitalize on Blue's inability to detect them. So they used the kind of strategy Iran would use against the U.S. if we attempted to invade them. And they defeated the U.S. Forces in one day in this war game.
Wow.
And this, now granted, it was a U.S. general that did this, but he was like, what would the Iranians do? And he did this. So then this was meant to be a 2-week war game. So they suspended it. They suspended the exercise because Blue, which was the United States, suffered this horror. I mean, you imagine 20,000 service personnel defeated in a day for an already unpopular war. Do you know what that would do? It would
be the end of America.
Yeah.
It would be literally the end of America.
People would not know how to deal with that, and this is one of the reasons.
People would overthrow the government.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons that they're hesitant for this, because they know that this will happen. They cannot go up against Iran. It's a huge country of 80 million people. They will be motivated to kill our troops if we land in their country. It will make the Iraqi resistance look.
Well,
like
I mean, we've been with them for at least 2 decades now, so they have a lot of resentment built up.
Yeah,
and they're really trying their best to not get on our level. But it's going to get to a point where it's impossible, and they're just going to have to fight.
Yeah,
I mean that's
the funniest
something that we can all. People can call me anti-American for saying that, but we can all empathize with that feeling.
Dude,
knowing the power structure treats us
once you
here.
remove your any emotional involvement with U.S. military success, which most Americans are there. They don't really give it because no one believe. Now everybody would love the troops if they felt they were actually fighting for us, but no one believes it. Nobody believes it. And when you see patriotards try and come out and like browbeat you with patriotarded rhetoric about fighting for freedom, it's a laugh. It's a laugh. It's a joke. The idea, and look, I don't have anything against military personnel themselves, guys that signed up for whatever reason. Some of our best guys are those guys, but they know. Yeah. They know damn well that they didn't fight for America. They didn't fight for anything where they fought for.
They Jews, all know. They all
corporate know. Interests and interests, Zionism and corporations. They know that. They're all damn well aware of it. Even if they saw their buddies die, they're damn well aware that this is the case. So they don't have any sentimentality over this bull. In fact, it pisses them off. So this exercise that they did, they actually had to. It was supposed to be 14 days, but Blue lost in 1 day. And so they had to script the rest of they reset and they redid it with a script, and which Blue wins an overwhelming victory. And then it was widely criticized by other people in the military establishment for being a farce. And they didn't seem to have learned their lesson, which is these tactics that the Iranians would be likely to use, not using sophisticated electronics, using land communications, using suicide attacks, small boat attacks.
Look at not even that, dude. Look at how Hezbollah defeated Israel in the 33 days.
Oh yeah, they owned them.
The Gulf in military defensive military technology has caught up with American doctrine and Israeli doctrine. So,
defensive tactics.
All these modern.
I mean, let me just say, with white America, I mean, when you look at the push with gun control and all that, it's because there's 200 million white people in the United States, and they have a lot of weapons. And I know, we can say that, okay, well, the gun people would never use them, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, if they really, 2 million sitting in Wall Street and Silicon Valley are not going to be able to hold down 200 million whites if it comes down to it. So, it doesn't matter what their technological advantages are. It doesn't matter. They're going up against people power on a level that's too big for them to handle.
Not for nothing, and I'm not saying this is my opinion, but if you're a real accelerationist, then you ought to be pushing for the United States to fight a war with Iran. That would be the end of the U.S. government.
It would be a major breaking point. And
it'll be the end. Something tells me that one of the reasons they're so aggressive and cracking down on us lately is because they're pivoting towards a war in Iran, and they don't want us to run the anti-war movement.
Yeah, they know
we will ride that political path.
I remember with the Iraq War, I mean, they were, and that's one of the things with that Farrakhan press conference. If you go back and watch it, he was laying out how far back they were laying the groundwork for the Iraq War. And I remember when I was a little kid watching Ahmed Shalabi on television on 60 Minutes, and 60 Minutes did like a puff piece about him.
Yeah,
the man who was going to, and they were just, I mean, it took decades for that plan to mature, and then when it actually came to fruition, they screwed it up. I mean, it really did a terrible job.
They're blowing smoke up this guy's balls for years.
Yeah, but I think with Iran, it's the same thing. I think they're sort of there's a momentum to this, and they're really taking their time. I don't think that Trump, maybe in Trump's second term, maybe if the economy starts to go bad or something, then it's time to start.
They've got a couple of persistent problems. One is the U.S. public. Okay,
yeah.
And two, what Stryker said exactly right, that a new anti-war movement, we would be a significant component, if not the main component, the main energy behind it. The left has lost their anti-war energy. It would be very destabilizing. Also, it's not they're not going to be able to bowl over Iran like they did Iraq. It's too big. There's too many people. There's too many people that are very motivated to fight America. Too many people that are actually well-trained fighters, like the Revolutionary Guard, etc. They're not going to be able to do it. And like I said, these asymmetric tactics, they already war-gamed it and lost terribly. They didn't seem to have learned their lesson, and the U.S. military of today is not the U.S. military even of 2002.
No.
Okay, we have more non-whites. We have more weird sexual deviants. They put women in charge of their, they're doing all this politically correct crap. They're promoting women. They're promoting trannies. It's just stupid. When they go out and they saber rattle like this, now this bluff with this aircraft carrier that was supposedly going there anyway as the other aircraft carrier leaves to come back to America, this was a routine change, and they made it like it was a big deal. But as they saber rattle, If they're going to saber, like, we just continue, don't support it. Actively don't support it. Actively juke the narrative. Actively counter-signal. And particularly in right-wing and conservative circles. Because these people have no real way of defending this. They can't really stand up for it. And these people were all eagerly on board with Trump when it was anti-Syria's message. Now, the fact of us continuously characterizing Syrian opposition as ISIS and Islamic terrorists, that created a huge problem for them. They can't go out there and say with a straight face, democratic rebels. Everyone laughs at that. Mm-hmm. It's a joke. I mean, Trump actually said it to Hillary Clinton in one of the debates. That was remarkable. Again, another thing he said, she was trying to say, these democratic rebels, and he was like, they're terrorists. We don't know who they are. I mean, the fact is we actually do know he didn't know who they were, but we do know who they are. They are terrorists. They are ISIS. And so continuing to say that really makes a problem for them. They can't do their bit. Well, these democratic rebels. No, these are jihadists, ISIS people. These are Wahhabists. These are Salafists, the most reactionary form of Islam that they're using as their cannon fodder against these secular regimes. We know that, and a lot of people know that now. And they can't. We also know, like, you pulled out of this Iran deal. What now you want to enforce it? I thought we pulled out. Right. This is a great narrative. Oh, Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. Isn't it great? Now we don't have to enforce it when Iran pulls out. Fantastic. We have no obligations.
What's the word of the United States of America mean if you're able to just pull out of deals and treaties and agreements
still
like
try
that?
And hold the other side to their end of it?
Like, why should anyone ever negotiate with the United States at all? I mean, don't people see the link between that and Kim Jong-un's ambivalence towards giving up his nukes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Why
I mean,
should
he sees what happened to Gaddafi or Saddam.
Oh, right. Exactly. I used to say that all the time. I remember right while they were talking about going into Iraq, Kim Jong-un's predecessor there, he was, waving his nukes saying, hey, we got him. We're going to nuke, California, like he was so belligerent and aggressive with their and it's funny because the U.S. is just like, okay, well, we're going to go over here. And then, Gaddafi is the ultimate example of a guy who works with Hillary Clinton, gives up his weapons, and then, is sodomized to death with like a rusty knife, by a bunch of savages in the desert. So, yeah, I mean, if Iran and that's the thing, by Trump breaking off the Iran deal, it actually – Iran knows then it's on notice. We better prepare for real. We better get ready.
We can ride it like the left rode the Vietnam protests. That's what I'll say.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think that there's major hesitancy and there's cooler heads in the room. There are the insane people that want to do this, and they also ultimately want to cut off Russia from Iran. That's why they say they want their oil exports reduced to zero, because one of the places they export to is Russia. Now, we currently can't do anything about that because we don't have which is also another reason for some of this Ukraine business. Because if we establish control there, then the shipping lanes between those two countries. But it's all the thing. Most of the thing about this stuff is it's sort of fascinating and interesting, but it doesn't. Americans are not going to in any way be helped by these wars. There's no sense that we're fighting for any interest of our own. We're not fighting for our homeland. We're not fighting for a vital interest of our country. We're not fighting even for an ally. I mean, Israel is not. These people they are more than happy to use up and spit out the USA and move on to something else if that's what they have to do. They don't give a. They don't have any nostalgia for this country. They don't care. It's a tool, and so that's why they will besmirch our good name. They will make our leaders and our country look like assholes and fools and villains on the world stage, and they will ultimately destabilize our whole economy and use up all our military assets. And they're happy to do it because they don't give a.
Mike, you made that point here recently, and you've been talking a lot about this supposed, Muslim radical who wanted to bomb a white nationalist, and that's clearly the direction they're going to go. And it is a little spooky. It is a little spooky because if you have to think, if I were Zog, what would I do? And that's perfect. That's brilliant. Stage bomb a white nationalist event and then say it was Islamic radicals, and that way you start that whole them fighting amongst themselves, and then then you could do the same thing to Muslims, and then we need to ban them both, like Farrakhan and Alex Jones. We need to outlaw both these dangerous terrorists.